Alright, so now let's go into our volume here and set up our rendering for a volcano. So let's go to our fireball import and let's move the camera around to find a good frame and a good place where we can see the fire and the smoke. So I want to make sure that we can see the detail of the flame there. Alright, one thing, let's make sure to disable the material here on our pyro, because this is going to override any material that we assign it in the geometry level. So I'm just going to disable that, or we could assign it in here as well. But I usually only use this node to assign materials when we've got multiple materials to assign. So it's just kind of a habit. For everything else, I'll kind of go into the geometry level and assign a shader there. Alright, so let's go into our materials. Let's create an RS material builder. Drop this down. Call this RS volcano. Let's dive inside and let's create an RS volume. So our volume material we want to hook up to the volume node here, to the volume input there. In our volume, we've got a few parameters. So our density is like the overall color, what we're giving it in the density channel, and the scatter color that it's going to give. The absorption can be thought of as the thickness of the fluid, how much it's going to absorb light. So by giving it a low value, it's not going to absorb much light and look very transparent. And if we do the opposite, giving it a lot of absorption, it's going to absorb a lot of light and make it look really thick. And then we've got our emission parameters that we're going to put either temperature or flame channel in there. And then we can color that based on those channels. And in the emission remap, we've got presets like we did in our volume visualization where we can choose black body. But we're going to customize this as, this is a pretty basic graph here. All right, so let's just assign this shader. Let's go into our fireball. And under material, I want to find that RS volcano. There we go. And if you don't have the redshift object parameters, make sure to select under the tab here, object parameters. And that'll bring up this node here, where we can then look at all our redshift parameters. The only thing I want to change in here is in the volume tab, I want to make sure that velocity grids is on. And that's going to be used for motion blur. Alright, so let's go to our terrain. I want to turn off displacement to make things faster. And I don't want to view any instances. I just want to view the volume. Let's work on that for now. So we've got this basic shader applied. Let's just take a render. And I was having some problems again with the render view. So for this, I'm going to go into our traditional render view. And I've already done one here. Let's just take a render of our second camera and our redshift IPR. Let's just render from here. All right, so here's our render. And you can see it's pretty black, and that's because for every light that we want to be contributing light to the volume, we got to click. They've got a separate channel under volume contribution scale. We want to make sure this is at 1, at least 1. So I'm going to select both our lights. Let's select contribution scale, give that a value of 1. And now we're seeing we're contributing light to the density, or to the volume here. All right, so let's go back to our volcano here. So now we can start messing around with these parameters. And it's still not updating, and that's because we actually have to go into our original cache here, and we actually have to disable this pyro post process, which is used for mantra. Remember how we created the matching material and all that? We have to disable this post process as well before it's going to start reading in, before we can start making changes to our shader. So now let's go into the shader. Now we can change things like the density and the scattering. So without doing too much to the fluid, I can try to get a little bit more of a general interest to maybe the density channel here. Like if we kind of take the scattering ramp over, we can kind of choose which parts of the fluid are going to scatter more than others. So you see we're kind of picking different areas. So we can kind of change this ramp. I'm going to kind of pull this over a little bit to kind of make it seem like some of the darker areas are scattering a little bit more, and some of the thinner areas of the fluid aren't scattering as much, and that just kind of makes it seem like it's almost less dense. It's got less density, and that's just by changing the scattering here. We can kind of keep going in and changing certain parameters. I don't want to get too crazy with this because it's going to look unnatural. So I just wanted to create a little bit of an apparent breakup in those areas. And we can change the color. Maybe scatter some kind of brown within that. And this is all without using any of the separate color channel. So anyways, I'm just going to keep it maybe something like this, so we're not scattering so much light in the thinner areas. So it gives it a little bit of a breakup. All right, let's just kind of keep going down. So the absorption coefficient, how thick the fluid's going to appear. So what if we just kind of kept this at 1, and then again kind of change this ramp so we're making the thinner parts of the fluid a little bit thinner by taking over, kind of eliminating this area of the fluid. But also we can kind of just have some breakup maybe towards the thicker parts of the fluid. We're adding a bit more transparency in there. So you can see how just by kind of these subtle changes, we're adding some breakup in the way it scatters light and how it's absorbing light. So that kind of gives us a little breakup just from doing that. And we can change the overall scattering of it, but I'm going to keep that at 1. And then finally we want to add in our emission channel. So at our emission, we can add our flame or our temperature. And if we kind of go back to our cache here, in previous versions of Houdini we'd have things like heat and fuel, but you can see we've got a new attribute called flame, and now we've got temperature. So we can use either of these. And I find that the flame channel is working pretty great. So I'm going to go in, let's choose flame, but how do we know what areas of the flame we want to scatter in? Well, let's just pause this IPR. Let's go up to our cache and let's see exactly how hot our flame channel really is. Because we're going to need to remap it in the shader to make sure we've got full control. So all right, what I want to throw down is a volume slice. And this is how we can kind of view each and every channel separately. So let's view the volume slice. And instead of viewing density, let's view the flame channel. And under source group, I want to source the flame here. So here we're viewing the specific flame channel here. So all right, let's go into our geometry spreadsheet. And you can see under flame, now we can determine what the highest value of flame is. So all right, I see about 2.5. That's pretty much good. So let's go back into our shader. And let's go into our render view. So for one, let's add the flame into our emissive channel here. And let's just give this a high value, something like 20. And let's take a render. All right, so here we have it. It's really blown out. So let's make sure we are remapping the values of the flame correctly here. So if you go into the Advanced tab, we've got our density remap and our emission. So we're using flame as emission. So I want to use, right now the values are from 0 to 1. In reality, our values are from 0 to 2.5. And we're going to remap that in a value of 2 to 1. So all right, at least we've got the full range there now. Now we just need to go in and change the ramp and get some colors that are a lot more accurate here. So I'm just going to kind of go in, change some of these colors. Less of a red, more of an orange. Maybe bring in some of the darker bits here. Bring this over. So mainly I want to be able to get a little bit more of a transparent flame look in the middle of the fluid. And to do that, I want to just bring over the black to the opposite side of the fluid. Oops, I want to duplicate it and bring it to the opposite side. And so really, if black is the coolest and white is the hottest, I want to make sure when we're super hot in the middle of the white, it's going to go to black and at least give me some more of a transparent flame. And if we kind of open up our render gamma settings here and kind of keep gamming down, I want to make sure that in the hottest parts of the flame, say right here, I want to make sure that I can pull back all that detail. So even though it's blown out here, I really want to make sure that in the hottest parts I can grab that. So I'm just going to continue on and keep changing some of the values.